Warning: murder-suicide is discussed. Noah nodded in agreement. Friendship, devotion, and care. The nurse smiled. Nurse Baylor glanced down the hallway toward the ICU room where Tate had been sitting outside for hours. That actually makes sense, Noah said. Joan smiled softly. She looked at the flowers again. I guess this is his way of making sure Noah wakes up to something beautiful. Later that afternoon, a deliveryman arrived at the hospital front desk with a large bouquet. The delivery man checked the paperwork. Where should I take them? The guy said, it's listed under the name Noah Lunas. The nurses exchanged a glance. Jones pointed down the hallway. Careful with those. She smiled. You're delivering them to someone who has been guarded outside that room like a security system. Baylor laughed quietly. I almost feel sorry for anyone who tries to move those flowers without permission. Jones looked toward the ICU door. Almost. The enormous bouquet was carried carefully down the hallway, a bright splash of yellow against the quiet hospital walls. When Noah finally woke up, the first thing he noticed was the smell. Flowers. Not the sterile scent of the hospital room. Something warm and fresh. His eyes slowly opened, adjusting to the soft lighting of the ICU. Beside the bed sat an enormous bouquet of beautiful yellow flowers. The arrangement was so large it almost looked unreal. The bright green leaves and delicate blossoms filled the corner of the room with color. As Noah focused on the flowers, he noticed something unusual. Each petal had been carefully hand-painted with small green streaks, like someone had taken the time to add a personal touch to every single flower. A faint smile crossed his face. Before he could say anything, the door opened. Good evening, sleepyhead. Noah turned his head. Nurse Baylor walked in with a gentle smile. How are you feeling? Noah blinked slowly. Tired. He yawned, his voice weak. Baylor nodded knowingly. That's completely normal. She checked his monitors before continuing. You've been unconscious for almost 24 hours. Noah's eyes widened slightly. 24. Yes, Baylor said gently, your body has been through a lot. She adjusted his blanket. You may feel exhausted for a few days, it's called fatigue, your body is using a lot of energy to recover. Noah looked down, trying to make sense of everything. What happened? Baylor's expression softened. You had some complications after your episode. Your body went through a lot of stress, including shock and a significant drop in blood pressure. Noah looked toward the flowers again. Someone sent those. Baylor smiled. Someone did. She didn't say Tate's name, but Noah already had a pretty good idea of who she was referring to. You were lucky, Baylor continued. You had some very good friends nearby. Noah was quiet. His mind slowly started piecing together the memories, the dinner, the ghost, Tate sitting beside him, the fear in everyone's voices. Baylor gave his shoulder a reassuring pat. For now your job is simple. Noah looked at her. Rest. Exactly. She smiled. And maybe enjoy the flowers, someone put a lot of thought into them. Noah looked back at the bouquet, noticing the tiny green streaks painted onto each petal. For some reason, that small detail meant more than the size of the arrangement. Someone had taken the time. A few hours later, Noah woke again. This time the room felt different. Not because of the machines. Not because of the hospital lights. Because the first thing he noticed was the flowers. There were even more of them. Noah slowly turned his head, taking in the ICU room around him. The enormous bouquet of yellow alstroemeria was still there, bright and impossible to miss. But now there were others. A vase filled with 40 yellow roses sat near the window, their petals soft and vibrant. Beside them was an arrangement of 50 chrysanthemums, full and cheerful, adding even more warmth to the otherwise quiet hospital room. Then he noticed another display. 60 zinnias. Their colorful blooms stood proudly among the other flowers, making the room look less like an ICU and more like a private garden. Noah stared. Seriously. A small laugh escaped him. He couldn't even imagine how much effort it took to arrange all of this. A nurse passing by the doorway noticed him looking around. Impressive, isn't it? Noah looked over. Where did all these come from? The nurse smiled. I think you already know the answer. Noah looked back at the flowers. He did. Only one person would go this far. Someone who had spent the night sitting outside his door. Someone who had refused to leave. Someone who, despite everything, always found a way to show up when Noah needed him. Noah reached over carefully and touched one of the flower petals. For all the grand gestures, it was the smallest detail that stayed with him. Someone had thought about him. Someone had wanted him to wake up surrounded by something beautiful. Nurse Baylor noticed Noah studying the flowers surrounding his ICU room. You like them? She asked. Noah looked around, still amazed. I don't even know what to say, there are so many. Baylor smiled. Someone put a lot of thought into them. Noah looked at the nearest bouquet. The yellow flowers, do they mean anything? The nurse walked closer, glancing at the arrangements. They actually do. She pointed toward the large bouquet of yellow alstroemeria. Alstroemeria, also called Peruvian lilies, are usually associated with friendship, devotion, loyalty, and being there for someone through difficult times. Noah looked at the flowers quietly. Baylor then gestured toward the yellow roses. Yellow roses traditionally represent friendship, warmth, appreciation, and caring for someone. They're not usually about romantic love the way red roses are, they're more about saying, you matter to me. She moved her attention to the chrysanthemums. Chrysanthemums can symbolize support, respect, and good wishes for recovery. They often represent someone hoping you have strength and a long life. Finally, she pointed toward the zinnias. Zinnias are often connected with lasting affection, remembrance, and staying connected even when things are difficult. Noah looked around the room again. So basically, Baylor smiled. Basically, whoever sent these flowers was saying, I'm here, I'm not leaving, I care about you and I want you to get better. Noah became quiet. His eyes drifted back to the flowers with the tiny green streaks painted onto the petals. He painted those. Baylor smiled softly. I don't know if he painted every single one himself, but someone made sure they were special. Noah ran his fingers gently over the edge of the blanket. He would do something like that. Baylor didn't ask who Noah meant. She didn't have to. Then he sounds like someone who cares about you very much. Noah looked back at the flowers, a small smile appearing on his tired face. Yeah, he whispered. He does. Noah stared at the flowers surrounding his ICU room for another moment before his stomach suddenly reminded him that he hadn't eaten properly in a while. I'm hungry, he announced. Nurse Baylor looked over. Noah gestured around the room. All of this plant life is making me ravenous. For a second, Baylor just stared at him. Then she laughed. Plant life. Noah nodded seriously. Yes, I'm pretty sure I woke up in a garden. Baylor smiled as she checked his monitors. Well, the doctor did prescribe you something very exciting. Noah looked suspicious. What? Hospital food. Noah's expression immediately fell. That sounds like a punishment. Baylor laughed again. Actually, it's what your body needs right now, something gentle while you're recovering. She paused, a playful smile appearing. However, Noah looked up. However, Tate got permission to bring you something better. Noah blinked. He did. Baylor nodded. He apparently decided that after everything your body went through, you deserved something more enjoyable than a plastic tray. Noah couldn't help smiling. That sounds like him. It does, Baylor agreed. She glanced around at the flowers. The flowers, the food, sitting outside your room all night. Noah looked away, suddenly quiet. Baylor smiled softly. He's been very worried about you. Noah looked back at the flowers surrounding him. I know. A few moments later, his stomach growled loudly. Baylor raised an eyebrow. Well, I think your body just voted. Noah laughed. Apparently. Good, Baylor said, eating is a very good sign. She picked up the chart. Now let's see what your mysterious food delivery looks like. A few hours later, Noah was no longer in the ICU. He had been moved to the Blue Wing, a private section of the hospital dedicated to the Blue family. The difference was immediate. Instead of a shared hospital room, Noah had a suite all to himself. There was a private bedroom area, a bathroom, and even a small storage space for personal belongings. It felt less like a hospital room and more like a quiet recovery space designed for comfort. The door opened and a staff member carefully pushed in a silver cart. Noah looked up. "What is that?" Nurse Baylor smiled. "I think your answer has arrived." The cart was rolled beside his bed, and the large covered tray was placed in front of him. Noah lifted the lid. He stopped. Inside was a carefully prepared meal that looked nothing like typical hospital food. There was low-sodium, low-calorie chicken with pasta arranged neatly on the plate. The portions were balanced, the ingredients looked fresh, and everything had been cut into easy-to-eat pieces. The presentation was so precise that it looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant rather than a hospital room. Noah stared. "This is hospital food." Baylor laughed. "No, this is Tate food." Noah shook his head, smiling. "Of course it is." Every detail had been considered. The pieces were already cut. The seasoning was adjusted. The meal was designed to give his exhausted body energy without overwhelming it. Noah picked up his fork and looked down at the plate. After everything, the fear, the ambulance, the ICU, waking up surrounded by flowers, this simple meal felt strangely meaningful. Someone had thought about what he needed before he even asked. Baylor watched his expression. "You know," she said gently, "some people send flowers." Noah glanced around at the room filled with them. "Yeah." She smiled. "Some people make sure you have dinner too." Noah looked down at the meal again. A small smile crossed his face. "That's Tate." Once Noah had completely finished the meal, he leaned back against the pillows, looking much more awake than he had earlier. The empty plate was proof that his appetite had returned. Before he could say anything, the door opened again. Another silver cart rolled into the room. Noah looked suspiciously at it. "More food." Nurse Baylor smiled. "Maybe." The tray was placed on his bedside table, and the cover was carefully removed. Noah's eyes widened. Sitting on the tray were two small square bites of chocolate cake. He stared at them. "Is that cake?" Baylor confirmed. Noah looked genuinely surprised. "Really?" She laughed. "Before you get too excited, the doctor approved exactly 2 small bites." Noah immediately reached for his fork. "2 bites." "2 small bites," Baylor repeated. Noah nodded seriously. "Understood." Baylor watched as his face lit up. "Whoopee." She laughed. "I don't think I've ever seen someone this excited about 2 bites of cake." "You don't understand," Noah said. "After hospital food expectations and being surrounded by flowers for 24 hours, this is basically a celebration." Baylor smiled. "Just remember, your body is still recovering." "I know." He looked down at the cake as if it were a precious treasure. "But it's chocolate." Baylor shook her head, amused. 2 bites, Noah. 2 very appreciated bites." The nurse smiled as she stepped back toward the door. For the first time since the emergency, Noah looked less like a patient recovering from a frightening event and more like himself again. Nurse Baylor glanced toward the corner of Noah's suite. "You have quite a collection of presents over there." Noah turned his head. He stopped. The corner of the room looked less like a hospital and more like a celebration. There were stuffed animals stacked neatly along the wall, gift bags sitting on the floor, and dozens upon dozens of balloons floating near the ceiling, held up by thin strings. "There must be at least 50 balloons," Noah said. Baylor laughed. "At least." The helium-filled balloons drifted gently above them, each one carrying a different message. Noah squinted, trying to read them. "Get well soon. We're thinking of you. Feel better. You got this." Then he spotted one that made him raise an eyebrow. "Don't die on us, you drama queen." Noah stared. Baylor started laughing. "That one is my favorite." "Of course it is." She pointed toward another. "There's another one that says, 'Stop scaring everyone.'" Noah shook his head. "I have a feeling I know who those are from." Baylor smiled. "Tate." "Obviously." She looked toward the pile of stuffed animals. "And then there's this." Noah followed her gaze. In the corner stood an enormous teddy bear. Not a normal teddy bear. A 7-foot-tall teddy bear. Noah blinked. Is that real? Baylor nodded. Very real. No. Yes. Noah stared at the giant bear. Tate bought me a 7-foot teddy bear. Baylor smiled. He named it. Noah already knew the answer would be ridiculous. What did he name it? She grinned. Mr. Cuddles. Noah covered his face with one hand. Of course he did. Baylor laughed. I have worked in hospitals for years. I have seen a lot of gifts come through these doors. She looked at the giant teddy bear. I have never seen anything quite like Mr. Cuddles. Noah looked over at the bear again. Despite himself, he smiled. It was excessive. It was dramatic. It was completely Tate. And somehow that made it perfect. Nurse Johnson was making her rounds around 1 in the morning when she quietly approached Noah's room. She expected to find him sleeping alone. Instead, she stopped in the doorway. Noah was curled up on his side, resting peacefully beneath the blankets. Behind him, Tate was asleep too. At some point during the night, Tate had pulled the chair closer to the bed and eventually ended up lying beside Noah, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. One arm rested loosely around Noah, the two of them instinctively curled together as they slept. For the first time all night, Tate didn't look worried. He didn't look guarded. He just looked exhausted and relieved. Johnson smiled softly before stepping away. A few minutes later, she found Nurse Baylor at the desk. Baylor. Baylor looked up. What? Johnson motioned for her to follow. Come here. Curious, Baylor followed her back toward Noah's room. Johnson quietly pointed inside. Look. Baylor looked through the doorway and immediately smiled. Oh wait. A quiet laugh escaped her. Look at them. Johnson nodded. Isn't that the sweetest thing you've ever seen? Baylor watched them for a moment. They're keeping each other warm. Johnson smiled. After everything that happened, I think they both needed that. Baylor looked at Tate, who had spent hours refusing to leave Noah's side, and then at Noah, who finally looked peaceful. You know, Baylor whispered, sometimes people don't realize how much someone means to them until something scares them. Johnson nodded. Looks like these two already knew. The nurses quietly walked away, leaving the room undisturbed. For once there was no emergency. No alarms. No fear. Just two people sleeping peacefully, holding on to the comfort of knowing the other one was still there. 2 days later, Noah was finally cleared to leave the hospital. After a full evaluation, the doctors gave him a clean bill of health. His vital signs had stabilized, his energy was returning, and there were no signs of any lasting complications. The only major instruction was simple. No donating blood for at least 3 months. His doctors wanted his body to have enough time to fully recover and rebuild his energy reserves before putting it under that kind of stress again. Noah nodded. I understand. Tate, standing beside him, nodded even more seriously. Good. Noah glanced over. You say that like you were going to physically stop me. Tate didn't answer. Which was answer enough. Noah laughed quietly. You're impossible. You're welcome. Once the discharge papers were completed, Tate took control of the wheelchair without hesitation. I can walk, Noah protested. No. Tate. No. I'm fine. You passed out, stopped breathing, and scared everyone half to death. Noah opened his mouth. Tate raised an eyebrow. No arguments. Noah sighed. You're enjoying this. Not even a little. The small smile on Tate's face said otherwise. Tate wheeled Noah out of the hospital and helped him into the backseat of the car, making sure he was comfortable before closing the door. They weren't taking Noah back to his own place. For the next few days, he needed supervision, rest, and someone making sure he actually followed the doctor's instructions. So they took him to Talia's house. Talia had already prepared a room for him, determined to help him recover properly. No overdoing it. She had told him. Noah smiled faintly. I know. And eating full meals. I know. And resting. I know. Tate crossed his arms. Good, because apparently everyone has to remind you. Noah rolled his eyes. But as they pulled away from the hospital, he couldn't deny one thing. For the first time since everything happened, he felt safe. People were watching out for him. And this time he was going to let them. The exhaustion finally caught up with Noah. After returning from the hospital, he barely remembered walking through the front door before Talia gently guided him upstairs. His body still felt heavy from the blood loss, every muscle aching with the lingering weakness that came after collapsing. The doctors had assured everyone he would recover completely, but for now they wanted him resting, eating well, and avoiding anything physically demanding. Noah didn't argue. As soon as his head touched the pillow, sleep claimed him. For hours he drifted through a restless darkness, his dreams vivid enough to feel real. He dreamed of Tate. At first the dreams were peaceful. They were children again, running barefoot through the blue estate, laughing as they raced each other across the sprawling lawn. Tate looked younger, happier, untouched by the years of fear and responsibility that would eventually harden him. They climbed trees, built forts, and lay in the grass nomming shapes in the clouds until the sun disappeared. Then the dream shifted. The dream changed again. Noah found himself standing beneath an overcast sky in the middle of Beverly Hills Cemetery. The air was unnaturally still. Rows upon rows of polished granite headstones stretched in every direction, disappearing into the gray mist. Fresh flowers rested on many of the graves, their colors strangely muted beneath the heavy clouds. He slowly walked down the center path, his footsteps silent against the damp stone. He stopped at the entrance and frowned. This isn't right. He looked around again. No. Confusion washed over him. This is Beverly Hills Cemetery. His pulse quickened. It should be Blue Cemetery. Joey had told him years ago that every member of the Blue family already had a burial plot waiting for them. It was another one of the family's long-standing traditions, planning for death generations in advance. Noah expected to see familiar names. Terrence Blue, Talia Blue, Joey Blue, Tim Blue, Julia Blue, Linus Blue, even Tate. Instead, he stopped. None of them was there. Not one. Every headstone belonged to strangers. Different last names. Different families. Different generations. Children. Parents. Grandparents. No member of the Blue family had ever been buried there. His confusion quickly turned into unease. This isn't possible, Noah whispered. He wandered deeper into Beverly Hills Cemetery, reading one headstone after another, hoping he had somehow entered the wrong section. Nothing. The burial plots Joey had once described with absolute certainty didn't exist. It was as though the Blue family had never reserved a single grave there. A cold breeze swept through the cemetery. The flowers began to sway. Noah looked over his shoulder. Someone was standing near the iron gate. Tate. He wore a black suit, his hands tucked into his pockets as he quietly stared across the sea of unfamiliar graves. You found it, Tate said. What happened? Noah asked. Joey told me this was supposed to be Blue Cemetery. Tate gave a faint, almost sorrowful smile. It was never called that. Then why did he tell me your family was buried here? They were supposed to be. Noah frowned. Then why is someone else buried here? Tate looked across the rows of unfamiliar names. They prepared for one future, he said quietly. But life chose another. Noah stepped closer. Where are your family's graves? Tate met his eyes, sadness settling over his face. You're standing in the wrong place. A church bell echoed through the mist. Once. Twice. 3 times. The fog thickened until it swallowed every headstone. When Noah looked back toward Tate, he was gone. Noah blinked and found himself standing in a cold, lightless place. It looked like an abandoned manufacturing plant or an empty warehouse. The concrete floor glistened with moisture and the air smelled of rust, damp metal, and stagnant water. Every distant drip echoed through the enormous building. A few feet away, 15-year-old Tate lay curled on his side in the fetal position with his back to Noah. He wasn't moving. Water dripped steadily from Tate's dark hair, sleeves, and pant legs, splashing softly onto the concrete beneath him. He looked as though he had been standing in a freezing rainstorm for hours, or trapped beneath an ice-cold shower that never shut off. Every thread of his clothing was completely saturated, clinging tightly to his thin frame. His hands were pale, not the gray-white of death but the waxy color of skin that had been exposed to icy water far too long. His fingers trembled faintly and his entire body looked chilled to the bone as though the cold had seeped into every part of him. Tate's body shivered uncontrollably. Violent tremors rippled through his thin frame as water continued to drip from his hair and clothing. His fingertips had begun to turn a bluish purple, evidence that the cold had settled deep into his body. Adult Noah immediately dropped to his knees beside him. "Tate," he whispered, reaching for the 15-year-old's shoulder. His hand passed straight through Tate's soaked jacket as though he were made of mist. Noah froze. He tried again, desperately attempting to pull Tate into his arms, but every touch slipped through him. He couldn't feel the wet fabric, the icy skin, or the trembling beneath it. He was only a ghost, forced to witness a memory he could no longer change. Another figure suddenly appeared. It was his younger self. The teenage Noah rushed into the warehouse, panic flooding his face as he dropped beside Tate. "Why are you on the floor?" he cried, kneeling next to him. "Tate, are you having another seizure?" The younger Noah frantically pulled out his phone and called an ambulance, his voice shaking as he tried to explain where they were. When he hung up, he wrapped an arm around Tate's shoulders and gently tried to help him sit up before attempting to lift him onto his feet. "Come on, Tate, stay with me, please." Tate barely responded. His body continued to shake violently, his lips had lost much of their color and water still streamed from his clothes as though he had only just stepped out of freezing rain. Watching from only a few feet away, adult Noah felt his stomach knot. He remembered. This had happened on Tate's 15th birthday. The memory came rushing back with painful clarity. The unexplained collapse, the frightening convulsions, the ambulance, the fear that Tate might not wake up. Poor Tate. It seemed like he was always having seizures back then, and every single one left Noah terrified that the next call would be the one telling him Tate hadn't survived. Noah slowly walked out of the bathroom and into Tate's bedroom. The room was exactly as he remembered it, quiet, immaculate, and filled with expensive furniture, but something immediately caught his attention. Mounted above Tate's bed was an enormous oil painting. Noah stopped in his tracks. It was a portrait of himself. He looked younger, lying on his stomach on the floor with his legs bent upward in the air, absent-mindedly kicking his feet as he read a stack of comic books spread out in front of him. His blonde hair fell across his forehead, and a soft smile rested on his face as he became completely absorbed in the story. Warm afternoon sunlight streamed through a nearby window, bathing him in a golden glow. Every detail had been painstakingly captured, from the wrinkles in his sweatshirt to the carefree expression that lit up his face. It wasn't just a painting. It was a masterpiece. Someone had spent hundreds of hours creating it, preserving a quiet moment Noah himself had long forgotten. At the top of the massive canvas, painted in elegant gold lettering, were 4 simple words. "The boy I love." Noah's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the portrait, unable to look away. He had known Tate had commissioned something like this just before Tate's 15th birthday. It wasn't hidden away in a closet or stored where no one would ever find it. Tate had hung it in the center of his bedroom, where it was the first thing he'd see every morning and the last thing he'd see every night. For a long moment, Noah simply stood there in silence, the memorable feeling settling over him that this painting had never been meant for anyone else. It had always been for Tate. As Noah continued staring at the portrait, something changed. A single droplet of water rolled down the painted canvas. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, water was streaming from the portrait, running over the frame and spilling onto the hardwood floor. It dripped steadily, forming a growing puddle beneath the painting. Noah frowned. "What?" He slowly knelt beside the puddle and reached out with trembling fingers. The moment his fingertips touched the water, he jerked slightly. It was warm. Not lukewarm. Hot, as though it had just flowed through heated pipes. Confused, Noah dipped his fingers into the puddle again before bringing them to his nose. He inhaled. The scent made his stomach tighten. It carried the unmistakable metallic smell of zinc and copper, mingled with the earthy odor of old plumbing. Steam rose faintly from the water, carrying the stale scent of hot pipes that hadn't been used in years. Underneath it all lingered the sharp chemical sting of bleach and chlorine, the same sterile smell that escaped from a freshly poured glass of tap water. The puddle continued to spread across the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Noah slowly looked back up at the portrait. Water was still pouring from the painted image of himself, as though the canvas were somehow bleeding memories instead of paint. Noah jolted awake. Warm, masculine fingers were slowly combing through his hair. Disoriented, he blinked several times, the dream dissolving into darkness as his eyes adjusted to the room. It was the middle of the night. Someone was sitting on the edge of the mattress in Talia's guest room. For a split second, Noah's heart raced, but as his vision cleared, he remembered where he was. He was still staying at Talia's house while he recovered from his recent hospitalization. The doctors had insisted he not be left alone, and everyone had agreed he needed to be watched until he regained his strength. The familiar touch continued to glide gently through his hair, calm and reassuring, grounding him as the last fragments of the unsettling dream slipped away. A car drove past the blue house, its headlights sweeping briefly across the bedroom before fading back into the darkness. As the room brightened for an instant, Noah finally saw the person sitting beside him. "Uncle Joey," Noah whispered, startled. He sat upright, his heart pounding. For a moment he wondered if he was still dreaming. "Uncle Joey." Emotion overwhelmed him. Without thinking, Noah wrapped his arms around him, holding him tightly. "I missed you so much." Before Noah could say another word, he was suddenly shoved backward onto the mattress. The embrace vanished. A heavier weight pinned him to the bed as the figure climbed on top of him. Noah stared up in shock. The face was no longer Joey's. It was Tate. His jaw was tight, his breathing uneven, and his eyes burned with unmistakable jealousy. The hurt on his face was almost more intense than the anger itself, as though Noah had betrayed him simply by speaking another man's name. His hands gripped the mattress on either side of Noah. "Why are you thinking about my uncle?" Tate hissed, his voice trembling with possessiveness. "Why are you hugging him?" Noah could only stare. Tate's expression darkened. "You wake up and the first person you reach for is Joey." The accusation hung in the air. For a moment, Noah couldn't tell whether Tate was jealous of Joey because he missed him too, or because Noah had given someone else the affection Tate desperately wanted for himself. "You have no reason to be jealous," Noah said, still trying to catch his breath. "I dream about different people all the time." Tate didn't move. His eyes remained locked on Noah's, hurt simmering beneath the anger. "Sometimes I dream about Uncle Joey," Noah continued softly. "I have a lot of happy memories with him, that's all, it was a dream." Tate's expression didn't soften. "You smiled when you hugged him," he said quietly. "You told him you missed him." "I do miss him." Tate looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I wanted that to be me." Noah blinked. "Tate, you woke up, saw someone you loved, and your first instinct was to throw your arms around him." Tate swallowed hard. "Then it wasn't me." "It wasn't a choice," Noah replied gently. "Dreams don't work like that." "But the feelings in them do," Tate whispered. "You don't know what it's like to wake up wondering if someone else has taken my place." Noah reached for Tate's hand. "No one is taking your place. Uncle Joey is family. I miss him because of the memories we shared. That doesn't change what you mean to me." For the first time since the dream had shattered, Tate's shoulders relaxed just a little, though the jealousy still lingered in his eyes like a storm that hadn't quite passed. Tate was still straddling Noah, his weight pressing him into the mattress. "I can't breathe," Noah gasped. "Tate, get off me." The words finally reached him. Without climbing off, Tate shifted his weight onto his knees, easing the pressure on Noah's chest just enough for Noah to take a full breath. Tate grabbed both sides of Noah's collar, bunching the fabric in his fists as he lifted Noah's head and shoulders several inches off the mattress. The rest of Noah's body remained pinned beneath him. His eyes searched Noah's face with growing desperation. "Did you sleep with him?" Tate demanded. Noah's heart pounded. He didn't answer. The silence only fueled Tate's imagination. "Answer me." Noah remained speechless, caught completely off guard by the question. Tate's jaw clenched. "You won't tell me." His grip tightened. If you did, his voice shook with anger, if you slept with my uncle and kept it from me. He stopped, swallowing hard. That would be the worst betrayal I could ever imagine. Noah stared at him, stunned. Tate leaned closer until they were only inches apart. I could forgive almost anything, he whispered through gritted teeth, but not that. His eyes glistened with hurt beneath the anger. If you were with him, if everyone knew except me, if I had to find out years later. He shook his head. I would never forgive you, Noah. The room fell silent. Noah could only look back at Tate, realizing this wasn't really about Joey anymore. It was about Tate's fear of being the last person to know the truth, and the unbearable thought that someone he loved might have shared a part of themselves with someone else while leaving him in the dark. Why haven't you forgiven Joey? Noah asked quietly. It's been a few years, Tate. Tate's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. He wasn't that terrible, Noah continued. He forgot a few of your birthdays, he didn't show up every time he promised he would, and I know that hurt, but are you really going to hold a grudge for the rest of your life? Tate scowled, his silence speaking louder than words. No one has always been there for you, Noah said gently. Tim forgot important days, your father forgot important days, they've both disappointed you more than once and you never carried that same anger forever. Noah paused before adding softly. I haven't been perfect either, Tate. Tate's jaw tightened. I've let you down, I've made mistakes, I've said things I wish I could take back. Noah searched Tate's face. Are you going to hold those against me for the rest of your life too? Tate looked away toward the corner of the room, his expression hardening. His hands slowly unclenched, but the resentment remained written across his face. Noah continued, his voice calm. People fail each other, that's part of loving someone. Joey failed you and he should have done better. I'm not saying you have to pretend it didn't happen. I'm asking whether you want that pain to define every memory you have of him. Tate remained silent. Because if you only remember the birthdays he missed, Noah said, you'll forget all the birthdays he actually showed up for. You'll forget the good memories that made you love him in the first place. For a long moment Tate said nothing. His scowl never disappeared, but beneath it Noah could see something else, someone struggling to let go of a hurt he had been carrying for years. You're letting your resentment poison all the good moments you had with him, Noah said gently. Tate looked away, refusing to answer. Noah sighed. That's not what Joey would want for you. Trying to break the tension, Noah reached up with one finger and lightly tapped the end of Tate's nose. Boop. Tate blinked. Did you just boop me? He asked, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and annoyance. A grin spread across Noah's face. I did. You booped my nose. I sure did. For a second, Tate simply stared at him, as though his brain couldn't decide whether to continue being angry or process what had just happened. The corners of Noah's mouth curled higher. It was necessary. Tate let out an exasperated sigh, rolling his eyes despite himself. You're impossible. And yet Noah replied with a smile, you're smiling. Tate instinctively tried to suppress it, but the faint grin had already betrayed him. I hate when you do that, Tate muttered. No, you don't. Maybe not. The next day, Noah finally returned to his own house. By the time he carried the last of his things inside, it was nearly midnight. Exhausted, he changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, climbed into bed, and listened to the silence of the empty house. Tab. Noah frowned. Tab, tab, tab. He sat up and looked toward the bedroom window. A familiar face grinned back at him. Shaking his head, Noah crossed the room, unlocked the window, and slid it open. Riley climbed inside as quietly as he could before Noah closed and locked the window behind him. I said I didn't think you'd come tonight, Noah said with a smile. Riley shrugged, returning the smile. It's okay, isn't it? Noah nodded. Yeah, it's okay. The tension of the past few days seemed to melt away as they embraced. They laughed quietly, relieved simply to be together again after everything that had happened. Noah rested his forehead against Riley's for a moment, enjoying the peaceful silence. Then, the front door opened. Both of them froze. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed through the entryway. Noah's eyes widened. Tate, he whispered. The footsteps grew louder as they moved down the hallway toward the bedroom. Oh no. Thinking fast, Noah gently pushed Riley down onto the mattress. Don't make a sound. He yanked the duvet over Riley's head just as the bedroom doorknob turned. The door swung open. Tate stepped into the room. He looked tired, but his eyes immediately settled on Noah. You're awake, Tate said. Noah forced a casual smile, hoping his racing heartbeat wasn't obvious. I couldn't sleep. Tate glanced around the room, narrowing his eyes ever so slightly. For a brief moment, the room was perfectly still. Under the duvet, Riley held his breath, praying Tate wouldn't notice the unmistakable outline of another person hidden beneath the blankets. The footsteps stopped outside his bedroom. Before Noah could think of another excuse, the bedroom door swung open. Tate stepped inside. His eyes immediately landed on Noah, who was sitting upright in bed. The blonde looked unusually tense, his shoulders stiff and his expression caught somewhere between surprise and panic. Tate frowned. You're acting nervous. I'm busy, Noah replied a little too quickly. It's not a good night. Instead of answering, Tate's gaze drifted toward the bed. There beneath the duvet was a slight ridge. The unmistakable outline of a body. Tate's expression darkened. Slowly he looked back at Noah. What is that? Nothing. Nothing, Tate repeated, his voice growing colder. He took a step toward the bed. Noah. It's none of your business. That answer only deepened Tate's suspicion. Without another word, he reached for the edge of the duvet. Noah reacted instantly. He stepped between Tate and the bed, planting a hand against Tate's chest and shoving him backward. No. Tate stumbled half a step before catching his balance. His eyes widened in disbelief. You just pushed me. I said no. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Tate's jaw clenched. You've never blocked me from seeing what's under that blanket before. Noah held his ground, refusing to move aside. The room fell deathly silent as the two of them stood face to face, each waiting to see who would make the next move. You're intruding, Noah said, keeping his voice calm and understanding. It wasn't as though Tate had known someone would be there. You should go, I'm entertaining someone tonight. Tate's eyes drifted back to the slight ridge beneath the duvet. A slow smile spread across his face. Are you fucking someone? Tate asked, sounding almost amused as though the possibility entertained him more than it upset him. Noah groaned and covered his face for a second. You're embarrassing me, Tate. Tate's grin only widened. Come back tomorrow. Instead of leaving, Tate casually walked over and sat down on the edge of the bed. Noah grimaced. Of course he wasn't going to leave. Tate had always enjoyed lingering just long enough to make other people squirm. He leaned back on his hands, perfectly comfortable. Maybe I want to talk for a little while, Tate said with a mischievous smile. Noah sighed. Now. Tate. What? Tate asked innocently. You said you were busy, I figured I'd keep you company. Noah shot him an unamused look, while beneath the duvet the hidden figure remained perfectly still, hoping Tate would eventually grow bored and leave. Is Riley under the duvet? Tate asked, raising an eyebrow. Noah's patience snapped. Tate, will you get out? He said sharply. I'm entertaining someone and you're making my guest uncomfortable. Tate only smirked. So it is Riley. His hand drifted toward the edge of the duvet. I'm just going to. No. Before Tate could pull the blanket back, Noah shoved him away. Caught off balance, Tate stumbled backward off the side of the bed and landed hard on the floor with a dull thud. Ow, Tate complained, rubbing his backside. I was just fooling around, you didn't have to push me. A second later, Tate's face crumpled into exaggerated fake tears. You pushed me, he sniffled dramatically. I'm wounded. Noah folded his arms. Knock it off. Tate continued the performance, pretending to wipe tears from his eyes. You don't even feel bad. No, Noah replied flatly, because you're acting. Tate peeked at him through his fingers. I could be crying. No, you couldn't. Tate lowered his hands. Noah. You don't have feelings, Tate, or at least you don't act as you do. You couldn't cry if you wanted to. For the first time, the playful grin disappeared from Tate's face. He stared at Noah in silence. The room suddenly felt much quieter. Beneath the duvet, Riley remained perfectly still, scarcely daring to breathe as the tension between the two buddies shifted from playful bickering into something far more personal. "What about this?" Noah said, taking a slow breath. "From now on, call before you come over. I'll tell you if I'm available." Tate looked genuinely offended. "Call first," he repeated. "What am I, Susie Andrew?" "No," Noah replied, "but this way we won't end up in awkward situations like this." Tate folded his arms and scowled. "Why don't you entertain people at their house? Then I wouldn't have to call." Noah stared at him in disbelief. He had finally reached the end of his patience. "Because my comfort matters too," Noah said firmly. "I shouldn't have to stop inviting people over to my own house just because you want to show up whenever you feel like it." Tate opened his mouth to argue, but Noah cut him off. "This is my home, Tate. If I'm entertaining guests, you need to respect that. Calling first is basic courtesy." Tate rolled his eyes. "I've never had to call before." "Well, you do now." The room fell silent. Tate stood there, clearly unhappy with the new boundary. Noah pointed toward the bedroom door. "Now take your cute little ass and go home." Tate blinked. For a moment he looked almost amused despite himself. "Did you just call my ass cute?" "I did. And you're still kicking me out." "Especially because I'm kicking you out." Tate let out an exaggerated sigh, muttering something under his breath as he headed toward the door, still looking as though he thought Noah's new rule was completely unreasonable. Tate took a step toward Noah as though he were about to argue again. Noah didn't budge. Instead, he raised one hand and pointed silently toward the bedroom door. "Out." Under his breath, just loud enough for Tate to hear, Noah muttered, "Temporary distractions always seem to matter more to you than long-term buddies." Tate's hazel eyes flashed. His expression hardened into an unmistakable scowl. Without another word, he stormed across the room and kicked the bedroom door open. The door slammed against the wall before he marched down the hallway. A second later, the front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. Silence settled over the house. Noah let out a slow breath. Tate could be intensely loyal, but he had never learned how to share the people he cared about. Anyone who interrupted his routines, his time with Noah, or even his sleep schedule quickly became someone he wished would disappear. Jealousy came naturally to Tate. Sharing never had. Riley wanted to leave immediately afterward, but Noah stopped him. "Don't." Riley looked at him questioningly. "There's a good chance Tate is sitting outside in his car, waiting to see who leaves my house." Riley sighed. "You really think he'd do that?" "I know he would." Reluctantly, Riley stayed. Nearly 2 hours passed before Noah decided to check. "I'll be right back." He stepped outside into the cool night air and scanned the quiet street. His eyes landed on a familiar car parked down the block. Noah closed his eyes for a moment. Unbelievable. He walked over to the driver's side window. Tate was fast asleep behind the wheel, his head tilted against the headrest. Noah tapped lightly on the glass. No response. He knocked harder. Tab tab tab. Tate jerked awake with a start, lurching forward and smacking his forehead against the steering wheel. "What ow?" Rubbing his forehead, he blinked several times before noticing Noah standing outside the window with his arms folded. Noah gestured for him to roll the window down. Tate lowered it halfway. "What?" he mumbled sleepily. Noah stared at him in disbelief. "This isn't your house, Tate." Tate rubbed his eyes but said nothing. "Why aren't you home with your wife like a normal person?" Noah continued. "Do you not have a life, hobbies, responsibilities?" Tate leaned back in the driver's seat, looking more annoyed than embarrassed. "I was just making sure everything was okay." "No," Noah replied, "you were waiting to see who came out of my house." Tate didn't deny it. He simply looked away. Noah shook his head. "You've been sitting out here for 2 hours. I fell asleep." "That's not the point." The silence between them said enough. "Tate," Noah said more quietly, "this isn't healthy." For the first time, Tate had no sarcastic comeback. He just sat there behind the wheel, avoiding Noah's eyes as the weight of the moment settled over both of them. "I wasn't stalking or waiting to confront your visitor in the dark," Tate said quickly. "I swear." Noah raised an eyebrow. I was just waiting for the person to come out and leave. So you were waiting outside my house. Tate opened his mouth then stopped. I was patiently waiting for your date or hookup to finish and go home. If nobody came out in 4 hours, I would go home. He looked down at his hands, the confidence fading from his expression. Maybe you would have let me in. Noah's expression softened slightly. Tate. I don't care who you see, Tate said quietly. I don't care who you spend time with. I'm actually happy you have people in your life. He swallowed. I just hate when it interferes with my sleep. Noah stared at him. Tate, I'm sorry you were sitting out here, but sometimes life happens, sometimes plans change. I know. I didn't plan for Riley to come over so you would be left outside on the street. I honestly just didn't think about it. Tate nodded slowly. And that's the problem, he said. Noah frowned. What is? You don't think about how things affect me. The words hung between them. Noah sighed. Some nights I'm just not available, Tate. That's normal. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. Tate looked away. Why don't you spend time with Chloe? Noah asked gently. I'm sure she misses you. Tate opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. He stared at Noah for a long moment, then looked down again. The conversation had been building toward an argument, but somehow that question stopped him completely. Noah watched as Tate went quiet, realizing he had hit a place Tate wasn't prepared to confront. Go home, Noah said with a small smile. Tate looked at him, clearly disappointed. Maybe we can see each other at lunch, Noah added. I'm sure Chloe is waiting for you. Tate immediately pouted. The expression was almost childish, a silent protest that Noah was choosing to end the night instead of inviting him back inside. Noah shook his head. You have someone who loves you waiting at home, Tate. Tate didn't answer. Lately, Tate had actually been spending more time with Chloe. Their marriage had settled into a routine, and once a week they hosted dinner parties at their new mansion in Beverly Hills, the home they had moved into after their wedding. It was the kind of place people expected the Blue family to live in. Enormous rooms, elegant decorations, and enough space to host family, friends, and business associates. Tate had a wife, a home, and a life of his own. And yet here he was, sitting outside Noah's house in the middle of the night, still looking disappointed that Noah had asked him to leave. Noah softened slightly. Go spend some time with Chloe, he said. She probably misses you. Tate glanced away, his pout fading into something more complicated. Because the truth was, he knew Noah was right. He just didn't know how to stop wanting to be the person Noah chose first. Tate's car looked completely out of place, parked on Noah's street. Noah lived in a quiet, middle-class suburb where most of the cars were practical family vehicles, older sedans, and modest commuter cars. Then there was Tate's. The luxury vehicle sat under the streetlights as it belonged somewhere else entirely, a machine worth nearly $250,000, polished, expensive, and impossible to ignore. It was the kind of car that turned heads without trying. Noah glanced back at it and shook his head. Of course, Tate would choose the most noticeable vehicle possible to sit outside his house for hours. Even when he was trying to disappear, Tate Blue was impossible to miss. Tate smiled as he reached out and lightly took Noah's arm. You don't mind that I was out here for 2 hours, do you? Tate asked. Noah looked at him and smiled. No, I don't mind. Tate seemed relieved. I don't know what I've done to deserve such a loyal ex-buddy. The smile on Tate's face faded immediately. Ex. Noah noticed the reaction. Tate. No, I heard you. Noah shook his head, trying not to laugh. You know exactly what I mean. Tate scowled, clearly unhappy with the word choice. Noah gave his arm a small pat. Now go home. Tate sighed dramatically. You really are kicking me out. Yes. Tate looked back at him, his hazel eyes narrowing with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. You've changed. Maybe, Noah said, or maybe I'm just finally setting boundaries. Tate didn't have a response for that. He stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to argue, but Noah's expression told him the conversation was over. Go home, Tate. Still pouting, Tate finally turned toward his expensive car. Ex-buddy, he muttered under his breath. Noah smiled as he watched him walk away. Tate finally returned home. The mansion was quiet when he walked through the front door, but the lights in the dining room were still on. Chloe was sitting at the table waiting for him. In front of her was a large stack of paperwork neatly organized into different folders. Tate stopped. "What's all this?" he asked. Chloe looked up and sighed. "Adult responsibilities." Tate gave her a confused look. She tapped the stack. "Home insurance, power of attorney forms, updated hospital paperwork, car insurance." Tate stared at the documents. "I thought we already did this." "Some of it," Chloe replied, "but things change, policies expire, information needs to be updated." Tate pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Chloe watched him carefully. "You've been avoiding this stuff." "I've been busy." "Doing what?" Tate didn't answer. Chloe already knew. She didn't need to ask why he had been gone in the middle of the night or why he looked exhausted. She knew there was one person who seemed to pull Tate away from everything else in his life. "Noah." "Tate," Chloe said gently, "you have a home, a marriage, and responsibilities here." Tate looked down at the paperwork. For once he didn't have a clever response. The stack of forms represented everything he had been trying not to think about, the life he had built, and the things he was responsible for maintaining. "I know you care about him," Chloe said. The meaning behind her words was obvious. Tate knew exactly who she was talking about. "Noah." Tate looked down for a moment, then nodded. Chloe leaned back in her chair. "As long as you prioritize us, our relationship and me, I don't care if you have friends." She smiled softly. "Actually, I prefer that you do." Tate looked up at her. "I like our life together," Chloe continued. "I like the person you are when you're happy, and if having people in your life helps you feel that way, then I want that for you." Tate was quiet. "All that matters to me is that you don't forget about us." He glanced at the paperwork between them. "You've actually been prioritizing me a lot lately," Chloe said, "more than you used to." Tate didn't argue. "I may not know Noah very well," she continued, "but from what I've seen he seems to change you." Tate looked at her. "For the better." The word stayed with him. Because deep down Tate knew Chloe wasn't wrong. Noah frustrated him, Noah challenged him, Noah forced him to see things he would rather ignore. But Noah also brought out parts of Tate that he didn't know still existed. Chloe looked at Tate for a long moment. There was one question she had never dared to ask. Not because she didn't wonder. Because she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Finally she spoke. "What is your relationship with Noah?" Tate went still. For a moment he looked caught off guard. Then he shook his head. "We've just been close since we were kids." Chloe waited, sensing there was more. Tate looked down at the table. "We didn't really have anyone growing up." His voice softened. "We were both only children in our families. We didn't have siblings to turn to, we didn't have someone our own age who understood what we were going through." He paused. "Noah was just there." Chloe watched him carefully. "He was the person I could count on." Tate leaned back in his chair, lost in the memories. "When we were kids, it felt like it was us against the world." The words carried more weight than he probably intended. Chloe noticed. She wasn't accusing him, she wasn't angry. She was simply trying to understand the person who had been a part of Tate's life long before she ever met him. "And now?" she asked quietly. Tate looked away. "Now it's complicated." Chloe nodded slowly. Because she could see that whatever Noah and Tate were, it wasn't something that could be explained with a simple word. Chloe chose her words carefully. There was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity and a desire to understand. "Did you and Noah ever sleep together?" The answer came immediately. "No." Tate didn't hesitate. "I've never wanted to do that." Chloe studied his reaction. "Why does everyone always ask that?" She gave a small, thoughtful nod. "I'm not trying to offend you, I'm just saying, it is unusual for two men your age to have this level of closeness." Tate's expression tightened. "We're just close." His voice became more defensive. "That's all." He looked away, frustrated. "There's nothing lurid or lewd going on." Chloe remained calm. "I didn't say there was." Tate sighed, realizing how quickly he had reacted. Chloe rested her hands on the table. I'm just trying to understand. You've known him your entire life. He seems to be one of the most important people in your world. Tate was quiet. He is, he admitted. The answer surprised even him. Chloe nodded. And that's okay. Tate looked at her. You can love your friends, you can have people who matter to you. I just want to know where I fit in your life. The question softened the tension in the room. Because underneath all the confusion, Chloe wasn't asking about Noah. She was asking about Tat. Do you sleep with your other friends? Chloe asked. Tate immediately felt the direction of the conversation changing, and he didn't like it. No. His answer was short. I didn't meet any of those other people until I was a freshman in college. Chloe watched him carefully. No, I've never done that with anyone else. She nodded slowly. Then why do you do it with Noah? The question landed harder than Tate expected. His expression changed. The defensiveness returned. I don't want to talk about this, Chloe. She studied him for a moment, but she didn't push. Not yet. Because she could see something in his reaction that bothered her more than the answer itself. It wasn't anger because she was wrong. It was uncomfortable because she had asked a question Tate had spent years avoiding. I don't want to overanalyze this, Tate said. His voice was firm, but there was something beneath it, frustration, maybe, or exhaustion. We got close as children, and that's all there is to it. Chloe stayed quiet. Tate looked down at the paperwork on the table, avoiding her eyes. All these questions are making me uncomfortable. He paused. And I don't want you asking Noah either. Chloe's expression softened slightly. He already has enough shit to deal with without people questioning him about something that's none of their business. Tate leaned back in his chair. Noah has spent his whole life having people misunderstand him. I don't want him feeling like he has to defend our relationship to everyone. Chloe nodded slowly. She could hear the protectiveness in his voice. Not jealousy this time. Not anger. Something different. Loyalty. I wasn't trying to hurt him, Chloe said. I know. Tate sighed. I just don't want people turning something important into something ugly. The room became quiet. Chloe looked at him carefully, realizing that whatever the exact nature of Tate and Noah's bond was, it carried years of history that neither of them could easily explain to someone who hadn't been there. Tate. Chloe pushed her chair back and stood from the table. You're my husband, I'm your wife. Her voice remained calm, but there was a seriousness behind it. If we can't talk about difficult things, then we have a problem. Tate looked toward the kitchen doorway. He didn't turn around. His back was facing her, his shoulders tense. There's nothing to talk about. Chloe watched him carefully. I don't see what the problem is, Tate continued. I treat you well, I provide for you, I give you a good life. He gestured vaguely toward the mansion around them. I take you on dates, we spend time together, I'm good with your parents, I prioritize our life together. His voice grew more defensive. We sleep together, I'm not cheating on you, I don't have a double life, I haven't lied to you. He finally turned slightly, though he still avoided fully facing her. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about this. Chloe stood quietly for a moment. Because she knew Tate wasn't saying those things out of cruelty. He genuinely didn't understand. To him, love was measured by actions, providing, showing up, being loyal, taking care of responsibilities. But Chloe wasn't asking whether he was a good husband. She was asking whether he could let her see the parts of himself he kept locked away. Tate, she said softly, I'm not accusing you of cheating. He looked at her. I'm asking you to let me know you. That made him pause. Because that was something Tate had always struggled with. He could give people everything. Except for the parts of himself he was afraid they might not accept. I know what's going to happen, Tate said. Chloe stared at him. Slowly, Tate turned around and faced her from across the dining room. If I don't talk to you about it, you're going to ask all your friends to come over. His voice carried a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. You're all going to sit around on the couch and talk about how I'm disappointing you again. Chloe's expression changed. Tate. Even though I spent 30 hours last week with you, he continued. Eating together, talking, spending time together, just enjoying being around each other. He shook his head. It's never enough, is it? The words came out sharper than he intended. We could be attached at the hip every second of every day and you'd still think there's something wrong just because there are things I don't want to share. He took a breath. Having parts of my life that I keep private doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Chloe didn't interrupt. Maybe there's something I don't want to talk about, Tate said more quietly. Maybe it's something difficult, maybe it's something I don't even know how to explain. His eyes dropped briefly. And you being the millionth person to ask me the same question isn't something I want to think about. The anger in his voice faded, leaving behind something more vulnerable. I just don't understand why everyone thinks they have a right to an answer. Chloe looked at him carefully. Because beneath the defensiveness, she could hear the real issue. Tate wasn't just protecting a secret. He was protecting a wound. You're not the first man I've dated, Chloe said. Tate looked at her, surprised by the change in direction. I told you about some of the mistakes I made before you. I told you about the professor I was involved with. I didn't know he was married, and when I found out, I had to deal with the consequences of that. She paused. I've met people with different levels of emotional and neurological maturity. I've been around different kinds of people. Her voice softened. But none of them made me feel this shut out. Tate's expression tightened. Why can't you talk about these things? Chloe asked. Why can't you be vulnerable with me? She stepped closer. I'm not asking because I want to control you, Tate. She shook her head. I want to know you. The words hit harder than he expected. Sometimes I feel like I'm competing, Chloe admitted. Tate looked away. All of my friends have husbands or boyfriends who are emotionally available. They can talk to them, they can share their thoughts and fears, they can have difficult conversations without feeling like they're hitting a wall. She swallowed. And sometimes with you, I feel like there is a whole part of you that I can see, but I can't reach. The room went quiet. I don't need you to tell me every thought you've ever had, Chloe continued. I don't need access to every memory or every feeling. She looked directly at him. But I need to feel like I'm your partner, not someone standing outside a locked door. Tate didn't respond. Because he wanted to say she was wrong. He wanted to explain that he wasn't hiding anything. But the truth was more complicated. He had spent years learning how to survive by keeping things inside. And now someone was asking him to do the one thing he had always avoided. Let someone in. I was vulnerable once, Tate said. The words were quiet. Chloe looked up at him. For the first time that night, she didn't see the angry, defensive man who had been refusing to talk. She saw someone remembering something painful. When I was in high school, I was lonely, Tate continued. Someone at school noticed, she asked me questions, she acted as if she cared about what I had to say. He looked down. And I was naive, stupidly naive, I answered her. I thought she actually cared about me. Chloe's expression softened. What happened? Tate was silent for a moment. She stalked me. Chloe's eyes widened. What? She followed me for years, Tate said, through high school, through college, even after that. He swallowed. I thought I was finally getting away from it, but she kept finding ways to stay in my life. Chloe stared at him, stunned. What did she want? Tate's face became distant. She wanted us to commit a murder-suicide together. The room went completely quiet. Chloe's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. When I refused, Tate continued, she decided the person who had taken me away from her was the problem. His voice became quieter. She wanted to kill the person she blamed. Chloe covered her mouth, shocked. And then, Tate looked away. Then she pulled the trigger on herself. Chloe sat frozen, trying to process what he had just told her. All the time she had wondered why Tate guarded himself so fiercely, why he treated vulnerability like a dangerous thing, suddenly looked different. This wasn't just someone who didn't know how to open up. This was someone who had learned that opening up could come with consequences he never imagined. Tate, and Chloe whispered. He shook his head. That's why I don't like people asking questions like they're entitled to pieces of me. His eyes met hers. Because the last time I thought someone cared, I was wrong. How old were you? Chloe asked quietly. Tate hesitated. I was a minor. Chloe's expression changed immediately. She understood then that this wasn't just about a difficult memory. It was something tied to a time in his life when he had been young, vulnerable, and unable to fully understand what was happening around him. Tate looked away. I don't want to talk about Noah. His voice was firmer now. And I don't want to talk about those things. Chloe opened her mouth, but Tate shook his head. You have to decide if having those answers is more important than us being together. The words weren't angry. They were a boundary. I don't want to discuss those memories, I don't want to relive them. He took a breath. Please don't bring it up again. Chloe sat quietly watching him. For the first time, she realized that Tate's silence wasn't always about hiding something from her. Sometimes it was about protecting something inside himself that he wasn't ready to reopen. Did she ever write to you? Chloe asked quietly. Tate looked at her. The question changed something in his expression. Not anger at first. Hurt. Then the wall came back up. I don't want to be married to somebody who asks me those questions. Chloe froze. Tate, I wasn't trying to. No. His voice was firm. It's none of your business. The words landed harder than Chloe expected. She's dead, Tate said, let it lie. He stood from the table, the conversation clearly becoming too much for him. I have told you what I am willing to tell you. Chloe watched him carefully. Tate. He turned toward her. You need to decide something. His expression was serious. Do you want to be a part of this family? Do you want to be a part of this house? He paused. Because I can't keep having the same conversation where I'm expected to hand over every painful part of myself just to prove that I'm committed to you. The room became silent. Chloe looked at him, realizing this wasn't just about a question. It was about two people who had completely different ideas of what trust meant. For Chloe, trust meant being allowed inside. For Tate, trust meant believing someone would respect the doors he kept closed. Noah made the same mistake you're making, Tate said. Stop asking me about events and people that are not happy memories for me. If I want you to know about something, I'll talk about it. Don't go looking for secrets I haven't invited you into. Chloe looked at him, confused by the sudden mention of Noah. I don't like being questioned, I don't like having to explain every part of myself. His voice grew sharper. I'm the CEO, I'm the person worth millions, I don't explain myself to everyone, I don't apologize to anyone about any decision or mistake I make. He looked around the house. I built this life. A pause. I make the rules. Chloe's expression fell. I asked you to be part of my life, Tate continued. I asked you to live in this house, to build a future with me. He shook his head. I did not ask you to go through my briefcase, my bookshelf, my private thoughts, or my memories and dig through the worst moments of my life. His voice lowered. I don't want to talk about some woman who entered a shower at school when I was a child. I don't want to relive it. I don't want to explain it. He stared at her. I never want to talk about this again. The finality in his voice was unmistakable. Anyone who brings painful memories into my life after I tell them to stop. He paused. I don't want them in my life. Chloe didn't respond. She watched as Tate turned away and walked upstairs. A moment later, the bedroom door slammed shut. The room where Tate usually slept alone became silent again. And for the first time that night, Chloe wondered if Tate wasn't refusing to share his past because he didn't trust her. Maybe he was terrified of what would happen if he did. The following afternoon, Chloe met her friends Mia and Brooke at a quiet tea room. Steam curled from 3 porcelain cups as the women settled into a corner booth. Brooke noticed Chloe's expression first. You look exhausted. Chloe let out a long sigh. Tate and I had an argument. Mia frowned. About what? Chloe stirred her tea absent-mindedly. I tried talking to him about emotional avoidance. She paused. I asked him about Noah. The two women exchanged a glance but remained silent. I wasn't accusing him of anything, Chloe continued. I just wanted to understand their relationship. I wanted him to let me in emotionally. And Brooke asked gently. He shut down. Chloe looked into her cup. The conversation got worse and worse. She swallowed. When I asked questions about his past, He told me that if I couldn't let it go, I'd have to decide whether having those answers was more important than our marriage. Mia's eyebrows rose. He threatened separation. Chloe nodded slowly. He basically told me that if I couldn't stop bringing it up, then maybe we shouldn't be together. The table fell quiet. Brooke finally spoke. Did he explain why he reacted so strongly? Chloe nodded. He told me about something that happened when he was a teenager. She briefly described what Tate had shared about being stalked by a female teacher for years and how the experience had left him deeply guarded. Neither Mia nor Brooke interrupted. When Chloe finished, Mia leaned forward. So this isn't just about Noah. No. Chloe shook her head. I think it's about trust or maybe fear. Brooke rested her hands around her teacup. It sounds like he sees questions about his past as someone trying to pry open wounds he spent years trying to close. Chloe sighed. I understand that. She looked down. But I also don't know how to be married to someone who tells me there are entire parts of his life that I can never ask about. Neither friend had an easy answer. The tea had gone lukewarm. The conversation wasn't really about Noah anymore. It was about whether two people could build a marriage when one believed love meant sharing burdens, and the other believed love meant respecting the burdens that someone chose to carry alone. Brooke nodded thoughtfully. Do you remember that ex-Marine I dated for about a year when we were 21? The other women nodded. Lucas, Mia said, I think that was his name. Yeah, Brooke replied, Lucas. She wrapped both hands around her teacup. His father had served in the military, and Lucas had gone through some awful experiences during his deployment. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Whenever his mother asked him what happened over there or asked about the people he served with, he would completely shut down. Brooke looked at Chloe. It wasn't because he didn't trust her. It wasn't because he didn't love his family. He simply wasn't ready to revisit those memories. She took another sip of tea. The more people pushed him to talk, the more he withdrew. Mia nodded. I remember that. Brooke continued. Eventually, his therapist explained something that stuck with me. Some people process painful experiences by talking about them. Other people cope by putting those memories in a box and only opening it when they feel safe or sometimes never. She looked directly at Chloe. I'm not saying that's healthy forever. But forcing the box open before someone is ready usually doesn't heal them. It just reminds them why they locked it in the first place. Chloe sat quietly, thinking about Tate's words from the night before. I don't ever want to talk about this again. For the first time, she wondered if she had been hearing those words as rejection, when perhaps they had been fear. Mia nodded slowly. If what Tate told you is true, then I can understand why vulnerability would be difficult for him. Chloe looked at her. I mean, think about it, Mia continued. If he was vulnerable with someone when he was young and that person later terrorized him and threatened his safety, it could make opening up emotionally feel dangerous. Brooke quietly agreed. Experiences like that can change how someone thinks about trust. Mia folded her hands around her teacup. It could also explain why Tate never had a serious girlfriend until he met you. Chloe listened without interrupting. If someone associates emotional closeness or intimacy with fear or losing control, Mia said, then becoming emotionally or physically vulnerable with another person could bring up a lot of uncomfortable feelings. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't care about the person they're with. It may mean that closeness itself has become complicated. She looked at Chloe sympathetically. That doesn't make your needs any less important. Wanting an emotionally available partner is completely understandable. Brooke nodded. And it doesn't mean Tate is wrong for having boundaries around painful memories. Mia sighed. It just means the two of you may be approaching intimacy from very different places. You're asking for openness because it helps you feel connected. He's protecting parts of himself because, in his experience, being open once had consequences he never expected. Chloe sat quietly, absorbing their words. For the first time since the argument, she wondered whether Tate's silence wasn't meant to keep her out. Perhaps in his mind, it was the only way he knew to keep himself safe. Chloe slowly shook her head. Then explain something to me. Mia and Brooke looked at her. Why can Tate be vulnerable with Noah but not with me? The question hung in the air. My husband spends 2 nights a week at Noah's house. Neither woman interrupted. After Uncle Tim and Linus died, Noah stayed with Talia and Terrence for a while. One night I walked past the spare room. Brooke leaned forward. What did you see? Tate was asleep. She hesitated. He was lying on top of Noah like a weighted blanket. The table fell silent. And whenever Tate had what looked like a seizure or woke up frightened, he'd crawl into bed beside Noah. Brooke and Mia exchanged another glance. Chloe continued. If Tate doesn't want to be emotionally or psychologically vulnerable, she paused, struggling to find the right words, what is it about Noah that makes it seem effortless? Mia answered carefully. Maybe it isn't effortless. Chloe frowned. What do you mean? There's a difference between trusting someone because you've known them since childhood and learning to trust someone new as an adult. Brooke nodded. If Noah has been there through years of Tate's life, including the worst parts, then the closeness you're describing may be something that developed over a very long time. Mia added, that doesn't necessarily mean Tate is choosing Noah over you. It may mean Noah became part of the way Tate learned to feel safe. Chloe looked down at her teacup. But I'm his wife. You are, Brooke said gently, and it's understandable that you want that same level of emotional closeness. She paused. But if Tate has relied on Noah since childhood during moments of fear or distress, those habits and feelings may not disappear just because he got married. They may simply be deeply ingrained. Mia reached across the table and rested a hand on Chloe's. The real question isn't whether Noah matters. Chloe looked up. It's whether Tate is willing to build that same sense of safety with you over time. The words lingered in Chloe's mind. She realized that what hurt her most wasn't that Noah had been Tate's safe place. I was wondering whether there would ever be room for her to become one, too. It's more complicated than that, Chloe said. Mia and Brooke looked at her expectantly. I've overheard Noah talking with Talia and Susie before. She paused. There are things Tate refuses to talk about with Noah, too. Brooke raised an eyebrow. There are. Chloe nodded. They're just different things than what he refuses to talk to me about. The two women exchanged another glance. And there's something else. Both Mia and Brooke leaned forward again. Tate always says he doesn't apologize or explain himself to anyone. Brooke gave a small smile. That sounds like him. But Talia told me something different. Chloe looked from one friend to the other. She said Tate does apologize. Mia frowned. To whom? Noah. Silence. Talia said Tate doesn't believe in apologizing to most people. In his mind, once you've lost his respect or his good opinion, he rarely changes it. He doesn't forgive easily and he doesn't think apologies solve much. Chloe's voice became quieter. But somehow. She looked down at her untouched tea. He apologizes to Noah. Neither Brooke nor Mia spoke immediately. Finally, Brooke broke the silence. Maybe Noah is the exception. Chloe looked up. Or, Brooke continued, maybe Noah is one of the very few people whose opinion Tate genuinely fears losing. Mia nodded thoughtfully. Some people don't apologize because they think it makes them weak. She glanced at Chloe. But they'll apologize to the one person whose relationship means enough to them that they're willing to risk admitting they were wrong. Chloe absorbed the thought. So you think it's because Noah is more important? Mia shook her head. I don't know. She chose her next words carefully. I think it means the rules Tate has for everyone else don't always apply to Noah. Brooke added quietly, whatever that bond is, it sounds like it was built over years of shared experiences, losses, and trust. That doesn't tell you what Tate feels, it tells you that Noah occupies a place in Tate's life that was formed long before anyone else entered it. Chloe looked out of the cafe window. She wasn't sure whether that explanation made her feel better or worse. Chloe took another slow sip of her tea, more to steady herself than because she wanted it. The cup trembled ever so slightly as she lowered it onto the saucer. Neither Mia nor Brooke rushed to fill the silence. They had known Chloe long enough to recognize when she was gathering the courage to say something she had been holding inside for a very long time. Finally, Chloe spoke. "There's something wrong with our relationship." Mia looked up immediately. "What do you mean?" Chloe stared into her tea. "I mean," she struggled to find the right words, "something changed." She looked out the cafe window, watching people pass by without really seeing them. "Before we got engaged, things felt lighter." Brooke nodded, encouraging her to continue. "There wasn't any pressure," Chloe said. "We didn't have to prove anything to each other. We weren't talking about mortgages or insurance policies or whether we'd made the right decision. We were just together." A faint smile crossed her face as she remembered. "We'd spend hours talking about nothing." She laughed quietly to herself. "We'd argue over which movies had the worst endings. We'd make fun of each other's favorite restaurants. Tate would insist some ridiculous action movie was a masterpiece and I'd spend half an hour explaining why it wasn't." Mia smiled. "He'd still argue with you?" "Oh, constantly." For the first time all afternoon, Chloe smiled without forcing it. "We talked about places we'd traveled, places we still wanted to visit. We'd stay up too late planning vacations we'd probably never take." She shook her head. "Sometimes we'd just sit together in silence and it wasn't awkward." Her smile slowly disappeared. "He'd tell me stories about work, about the absurd meetings he had, about some executive who thought they knew better than everyone else." She looked down at the tablecloth. "And I never felt like I had to pull words out of him." Brooke listened carefully. "He volunteered things." Chloe nodded. "He'd ask about my day, he'd actually listen, we'd laugh." She swallowed. "It wasn't perfect. But it felt easy." The silence returned. Chloe wrapped both hands around her teacup as if trying to warm herself. "Now..." She stopped. The word caught in her throat. Brooke reached across the table and gently rested a hand over Chloe's. "Go on." Chloe sniffled, blinking away tears. "It's like..." She couldn't finish. Mia waited patiently. "It's like..." Chloe whispered again. She closed her eyes for a moment. "I'm another task he has to complete." Neither woman spoke. The words seemed to hang over the table. "I feel like I'm part of his job description," Chloe continued, her voice trembling, "like he's checking boxes." She counted them off with her fingers. "Be a good husband. Take Chloe on dates. Spend time together. Call her parents. Handle the paperwork. Come home." She looked at Brooke. "He does all of those things." Brooke nodded slowly. "But sometimes," Chloe said, "it feels like he's performing the role of a husband instead of simply being one." A tear slid down her cheek. "I know he cares about me." She quickly wiped her eyes. "I've never doubted that. But caring and being emotionally present aren't always the same thing." The admission seemed to drain something out of her. "I keep wondering," she whispered, "if he feels like he doesn't perform well enough." She stopped again. "I don't even know how to finish that sentence." Brooke squeezed her hand. "You don't have to." Chloe took a shaky breath. "He broke up with me." Both women looked at her. "And then, for reasons I've never fully understood." She shook her head in disbelief. "He married me." I've replayed that over and over. Her voice became quieter. "I still don't understand it. He was so certain. We were sitting in that restaurant and he looked me straight in the eye and told me, 'I'm no good for you.'" She remembered every word. "I believed him. We ended things. We didn't see each other for 2 weeks." Another pause. "Then out of nowhere he called me." Her brow furrowed. "He said he wanted to take me somewhere. I thought maybe he wanted closure." A sad smile crossed her face. "Instead, he got down on one knee and proposed." Chloe looked between her two friends. "I said yes." She sighed deeply. "But a part of me has been trying to understand that moment ever since. Why did the man who was convinced he wasn't good enough for me suddenly decide he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me? I've never stopped wondering what changed." "I have no idea," Chloe admitted. "I honestly don't know why Tate married me." She stared into her tea as if the answer might somehow be floating there. "When we first started dating, I kept getting this strange feeling. Mia tilted her head. What feeling? Chloe hesitated. It almost felt like he wasn't dating me because he had fallen in love with me. The words sounded harsh even to her own ears. It felt like he was dating me so he could finally cross something off a list. Brooke frowned. What do you mean? Chloe gave a small uneasy laugh. You know how some people say, well, you can't say you don't like something if you've never tried it. The other two women nodded. That's what it felt like. She sighed. Like Tate was thinking, fine, I'll try dating. Then if anyone ever asked him, how do you know you don't like relationships if you've never been in one? He could honestly answer, I tried it, it wasn't for me. She shook her head. I know that sounds ridiculous. No, Mia said, keep going. Chloe looked embarrassed. I've never said this out loud before. Brooke smiled reassuringly. That's why we're here. Chloe took another sip of tea. It's just. She stopped again. No, it's crazy. Mia groaned dramatically. Chloe, the suspense is killing me. That finally earned a faint smile. You know Tate didn't date his entire life. Both women nodded. Then when he was 26, he suddenly asked me out. She spread her hands. Why? I've heard from several people who knew him before me that I was the only person he'd ever dated. No girlfriends. No casual dates. No stories about old relationships. Nothing. She leaned back in her chair. He didn't spend years looking for the right person. He didn't go through heartbreak after heartbreak. He just didn't date. Then one day he asked me out. Brooke listened intently. We dated. Chloe's expression grew more thoughtful. Then he broke up with me. She shook her head. I figured that was the end of it. But then. She laughed softly, still unable to believe it herself. For reasons I still don't understand, he came back. He proposed. I said yes. She looked from Mia to Brooke. Tell me that makes sense. Neither woman answered immediately. Because it doesn't make sense to me. Chloe folded her hands together. It feels like there are chapters missing from the story. She sighed. I understand why people fall in love. I understand why people break up. I even understand why some couples get back together. But Tate. She looked down. He ended the relationship because he believed he wasn't good for me. Her voice softened. And then 2 weeks later, he asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. She shook her head slowly. I've been trying to understand that decision ever since. The cafe grew quiet. Brooke finally spoke. Have you ever asked him what changed? Chloe smiled sadly. I have. And he just says. She paused. I changed my mind. She looked at her friends with a tired smile. I've never believed that was the whole answer. Excuse me, a woman at the next table said politely. I'm sorry, I couldn't help overhearing part of your conversation. Chloe, Mia, and Brooke turned toward her. The woman offered an apologetic smile. I've met Tate a few times at charity galas and other social functions. I don't know him personally, so please take this as nothing more than an observation. Chloe nodded. Go ahead. The woman took a sip of her coffee before continuing. From what I remember, Tate never seemed like someone who wanted to get married. At least publicly, he gave that impression. She shrugged. I could be completely wrong, but hearing your story made me wonder if there were pressures behind the scenes. What kind of pressures? Brooke asked. The woman chose her words carefully. In some very wealthy or influential families, there can be strong expectations about marriage and children. Sometimes there's an age by which family members are expected to settle down. Sometimes there are expectations tied to continuing the family line or maintaining the family's public image. She looked at Chloe. I'm not saying that's what happened with Tate, I have no way of knowing. She continued, but I've heard of families where if an adult child doesn't choose a partner on their own after years of resisting, relatives begin introducing prospective spouses or applying increasing pressure to marry. Every family is different. Mia frowned. So you're saying he may have felt pressure? It's one possibility among many, the woman replied. It could also be that he genuinely changed his mind or that he fell in love in a way he hadn't expected. Only Tate knows the real reason. She smiled apologetically. I just wouldn't assume there was only one explanation. The three women sat quietly as the stranger returned to her own table. Chloe stared into her teacup. For the first time, she wondered whether there had been influences on Tate's decision that he had never spoken about, not because he was hiding them from her, but because some parts of his life had always been shaped by expectations she had never experienced herself. Chloe stared into her teacup for a long moment before speaking again. There was something else. Mia and Brooke looked at her. Tate was late for our wedding. Both women blinked. He was late, Brooke repeated. Chloe nodded. He called me and said he had one last surprise he was picking up for me. He kept apologizing, saying it was taking longer than he expected. She sighed. But he was late to our own ceremony. Mia's eyes widened. What was everyone thinking? My mother was convinced he'd changed his mind. Chloe gave a sad smile. She thought he'd bailed on me. The guests were whispering, people kept looking at the entrance every time the doors opened. She remembered the knot in her stomach. I was standing there wondering whether I was about to be humiliated in front of everyone I loved. Brooke reached over and squeezed her hand. That must have been awful. It was. Chloe nodded. I kept checking the time. She laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Every minute felt like an hour. And then Terrence walked over to me. What did he say? Mia asked. Chloe remembered his confidence. He told me he'll be here. She paused. He said Tate isn't going to embarrass this family. The wording had stayed with her ever since. Not he loves you too much not to come, Chloe said quietly. Not he wouldn't do that to you. She looked at her friends. He said Tate wasn't going to embarrass the family. The three women fell silent. And he was right, Chloe continued. Tate did show up. She smiled faintly. He apologized for being late. Her smile faded again. But every now and then. She looked down at the table. I still wonder what was so important that he risked arriving late to his own wedding. The question lingered between the three friends, unanswered as the tea in their cups slowly grew cold. And the way he left Noah, Chloe said quietly, it was just heartbreaking. Mia and Brooke listened without interrupting. I don't understand it. She shook her head. How can you spend 22 years with someone who has been part of your life since childhood, and then just walk away? Her voice trembled. He didn't even reach out to Noah for over a year. Brooke frowned. A whole year. Chloe nodded. And when they finally crossed paths again, he treated him even worse. She sighed. I watched Noah try to pretend he was fine, but he wasn't. She looked down at her hands. There was one day that has never made sense to me. Mia leaned forward. What happened? Tate humiliated Noah in our living room. The memory still bothered her. He was cold, dismissive. It was like he wanted everyone to believe Noah didn't matter. She paused. At one point, Tate even told my brother he didn't know Noah's name. Brooke's eyebrows rose. That's hard to believe after 22 years. I know. Chloe nodded. But then, less than an hour later, she looked up. Derek confronted Noah. And before anyone else could react, Tate stepped in. He immediately protected Noah. The contradiction had never left her. That's what I can't understand. She looked from Mia to Brooke. How can someone publicly humiliate a person one moment, then instinctively protect that same person the next? Neither friend answered right away. It was like I was watching two completely different versions of Tate. Chloe sighed. One acted as if Noah meant nothing. The other reacted as though protecting Noah was second nature. She shook her head. I've never been able to reconcile those two moments. Brooke hesitated before asking the question that had been sitting in the back of her mind. Do you think Tate even wanted to marry you? Chloe didn't answer immediately. She stared into her teacup before finally giving a small shrug. I don't know. Her voice was quiet. And that's the hardest part. She looked at Brooke. I honestly don't know the answer. She sighed. Why would he marry me if he didn't love me? Neither Mia nor Brooke interrupted. People keep suggesting he cared about appearances or family expectations, but that doesn't make sense to me. She shook her head. Tate has never cared much about public opinion. If he wanted to be married just to satisfy other people, he could have done that years earlier. Brooke nodded thoughtfully. He spent most of his adult life avoiding relationships. Exactly. Chloe spread her hands. Then, completely out of nowhere, he started dadding. She laughed softly. May. She still sounded surprised by it. And once we got back together. She paused. Everything happened so fast. Mia leaned forward. How fast? 10 days. Both women stared at her. He married me 10 days after we got back together. Brooke blinked. 10 days. Chloe nodded. He called churches all over Southern California until he found one that could fit us into their schedule. She smiled faintly at the memory. He paid thousands of dollars just to make it happen that quickly. She looked down. It wasn't as though I was pressuring him. It was the opposite. She looked back at her friends. It was like... She searched for the right words. He couldn't wait. The contradiction was obvious even to her. The same man who spent years avoiding dating. Who broke up with me because he thought he wasn't good enough. Suddenly couldn't marry me fast enough. She folded her hands together. That's what I can't make sense of. Brooke exchanged a glance with Mia. Whatever his reason was, Brooke said quietly, it doesn't sound like someone who was indifferent. Chloe nodded. I don't think he was indifferent either. She sighed. I just wish I understood what changed so suddenly. The question lingered over the table, unanswered, as all three women silently reflected on the mystery of a man who had spent years avoiding commitment, only to rush headlong into it when no one expected him to. Chloe let out a long breath. There are so many things about our wedding that I've never understood. Mia and Brooke remained quiet, letting her continue. I didn't want to get married that fast. She shrugged. I wasn't against marrying him, I loved him. She smiled faintly. I just didn't understand why everything had to happen immediately. She traced her finger around the rim of her teacup. I wanted our wedding to be on June 26. Brooke tilted her head. Why that date? My grandmother passed away on June 26. Chloe smiled sadly. I thought getting married on that day would make it feel like something beautiful had come out of one of the hardest days of my life. She looked down. I told Tate that. What did he say? Mia asked. He said it had to be June 12. Her voice became flatter as she remembered. And he didn't say it like we were discussing options. She shook her head. He said it in a way that made it clear the decision had already been made. That's when the church is available. That was the end of the conversation. Brooke frowned. So there wasn't any compromise. No. Chloe sighed. It wasn't a fight. It was just decided. She took another sip of tea. And then there was Noah. The two women looked up. Tate didn't even want Noah invited to the wedding. Both Mia and Brooke looked surprised. You had to convince him. Chloe nodded. I kept telling him it would mean a lot to Talia. I wanted Noah to feel included. She smiled faintly at the memory. Every time I brought it up, Tate made the same face. She mimicked his expression, a mixture of annoyance and reluctance. And every time. He said no. What changed? Brooke asked. I kept asking. Chloe gave a small shrug. Eventually, I think he got tired of arguing with me. So he finally handed the invitation to Talia and told her to give it to Noah. She paused. It wasn't because he'd suddenly changed his mind. It felt more like he wanted the whole conversation to go away. Mia frowned thoughtfully. That's interesting. Why? Because from everything you've told us, Tate doesn't usually give in just because someone keeps asking. Chloe nodded slowly. That's exactly what bothers me. She looked down at her hands. He fought me on inviting Noah. But in the end, he still made sure Noah received an invitation. She sighed. Sometimes I feel like every decision Tate makes has two completely different stories behind it. And I only ever get to hear one of them. Even after we were married, Chloe said quietly, anytime I brought Noah up, Tate would shut the conversation down. Mia and Brooke listened. If I asked how Noah was doing, Tate would change the subject. She sighed. And if I kept asking, her shoulders slumped. He'd get angry and leave the room. Brooke frowned. He wouldn't even talk about him. Chloe shook her head. No. She stared into her tea. He'd tell me he didn't care about Noah anymore, that, as far as he was concerned, Noah was dead to him. The words still hurt to repeat. It didn't matter what I asked, if Noah was traveling, if he'd started a new job, if he'd made new friends, he didn't want to hear any of it. Mia looked surprised. Nothing. Nothing. Chloe nodded. The more I tried to bring Noah up, the more upset Tate became. She looked at her friends. It wasn't just that he refused to answer. It was like the subject itself made him furious. She paused. Sometimes he behaved almost like he was throwing a tantrum. Brooke remained thoughtful. Did you ever tell him he should reach out? Chloe gave a tired laugh. Several times. What did he say? He looked at me and said, mind your own fucking business. The table fell silent. Chloe wrapped both hands around her teacup. That's what confused me. She looked from Mia to Brooke, unsure what to say next. If Noah truly meant nothing to him, like what?